Thanks for tuning in to the Football Talk Squadron. I'm Dutch, and this is our next episode going through week 4 of the NFL and also including last night's game of the Bears versus the Washington Commanders. Starting off this podcast, we're going to do only one guess the player, and you'll see why immediately when I say it. We'll talk a little bit about him. NFL lost a legend last night in Dick Butkus, so that's the guess the player of where did Dick Butkus go to college. If you haven't already seen it, I'll give you a few moments just to think about it. If you need more time, go ahead and pause because the answer is Illinois. He was part of the Illinois Fighting Illini. He was chosen 3rd overall in the NFL draft. And Dick Butkus, for a lot of people, I don't even think they know who he is, which is sad because he was the start of what football truly is on defense. When you talk about someone who was feared from the middle linebacker position, he is the godfather of being a middle linebacker. I don't think there's anyone that could argue that. And it's shown by his peers and his competitors from the time that he played. And to highlight this, the Bears were 1-13 in 1969. And the Defensive Player of the Year, Dick Butkus. He actually won it back-to-back years in 69 and 70. Played for a perennial loser in terms of the Bears, who they were at that time. They were a terrible football team. They had Dick Butkus on defense and they had Gale Sayers on offense. Outside of that, they could not get guys together. But he was such a dominating force that people recognized what he did, winning Defensive Player of the Year. That just speaks a small part of who he was. If you really want to watch something, NFL films, NFL Hardest Hitters, I think this came out in like the 90s. Watching his he's the number 1 hitter. And when you watch his film, you sit back and you're like, goodness sakes. And one of the guys they bring on is another person that is sort of forgotten in nowadays football talk, which is Deacon Jones. This is the guy who coined the term sack. Like, this is where it originated. He is considered by most to be one of, if not the greatest defensive end of all time. They actually had to invent rules to keep him from being successful. He used to smack guys in the helmet when he came off the line and just sort of discombobulate him, and he would get around him and get a sack. Well, in that documentary, he actually says 2 things about Butkus, which I find to be pretty hilarious. One, he has his own poem that he wrote about Butkus. He said, "Roses are red, violets are blue. If you got any sense, you'll keep Butkus away from you." And he followed that up with saying, because when Butkus hit you, he was trying to put you in the cemetery, not the hospital. Like, when you watch film on him, I mean, he was just obliterating guys, taking running backs right off their feet, running through the hole, hitting. And back in the day, I mean, not to say that it wasn't an athletic generation, but it was a lot bigger body. Maybe it was the shoulder pads. It wasn't as in shape as I think it is as today in the NFL, but Butkus was truly between the hashes. There was no one faster at getting to the football and would lay the lumber. I mean, I remember watching an interview with Butkus during his playing days, and he said to the effect that they were asking him, why do you hit guys so hard? And he just said, when they get up and they don't need to go look to see who hit them because they know it was me. And that's who he was. He was a great ambassador for the sport. And I think even more so, he is and will forever be the ambassador of the Bears. Like, when you think about the Bears in the position of middle linebacker, you've had 3 Hall of Fame talents. You've had Butkus, you've had Singletary, and you've had Urlacher. Butkus is the godfather of that generation. I think that when you sit back and you think about all-time Chicago Bear greats, Dick Butkus is on that mountain. He is a guy that you can't mention the Chicago Bears without thinking of Dick Butkus. It's a tremendous loss for the sport. The college football still has the Dick Butkus Award every single year for both high school and college athletes for the best linebacker in the country. It's going to be a continued tradition. His son runs the program with his dad, and this will now be the first year that it's just his son running it. He's going to be missed, but at the end of the day, tremendous linebacker. Rest in peace to Dick Butkus. But getting into that, as we transition from, a little bit of sadness to a little bit of joy, I saw this tweet that said, you knew God wasn't going to let the Bears lose on the day that Dick Butkus died. And man, the Bears actually came out and looked good. I had a buddy that texted me and was talking about how well Fields looked, and he did look really good. I think this is what it shows us, is that when you give him time, he's not a bad football player. The only thing that I sit back and pause to Bear fans who are like, oh, we're seeing this second coming of Justin Fields, who we've always seen, is this. I still think the Bears are going to be a sub 500 team. I think that they're going to be competing for the number 1 overall draft pick in next year's draft. That's not really a shot at Fields, it's just the team in general. They have a lot of injuries in terms of just defensive and offensive. Offensive linemen were going down last night. They still look good. It was also against the Commanders. Defensive line needs help. They just need a lot of help around them. It's not something that you can really expect Fields to go out week in, week out and look like he did last night. My question for Bears fans is that if, let's just say, Fields still looks like he looked last night, but you still are getting the number 1 overall pick, what are you going to do? Are you going to take Caleb Williams? Or are you going to keep Justin Fields? I think that's sort of the scenario that for a lot of guys, because you need to think about it in that term for the Bears, they're going to have a higher draft pick. There's a lot of quarterbacks that are going to come out in this year's draft. I would argue that if Fields continues to play like he did last night, then the smart move is to either take an offensive lineman or trade back or trade with someone for an offensive lineman to get help around Fields that is not in the skill position. Yes, it's good to have running back. Yes, it's good to have more wide receivers. Anyone would love to have those different positions. You need to focus on the future of the Bears, which is if it's Justin Fields, you've got to be able to protect him. And if Justin Fields starts to struggle after this week, then it's Caleb Williams. You also own the Panthers' number 1 draft pick, which right now, if the season ended today, the Panthers' number 1 pick would be the first pick in the overall draft. They're the only team that's not won a game. And the other would go to the Bears. So Bears would still own 1 and 2 if the season ended today. You sit back, I think Marvin Harrison Jr. would be a great pick, but at the same time, if you're committed to keeping Fields, you got to go to the offensive line. We'll just see how the season plays out for the Bears. The Broncos aren't a good team. Let's be honest. They should have won that game. They had the Broncos beat. The Bears just did Bears things and let the Broncos come back. The Commanders with Sam Howell, I think as the season continues along, more and more teams are going to have success versus Sam Howell just because he's a young guy. They're going to keep throwing stuff that he hasn't seen. If they find a weakness, they're going to start to exploit that type of weakness in him. We'll just see what happens as the season goes on. I don't have high hopes for the Commanders or the Bears. If I had to give the edge to one of the two teams, it would be the Bears because of Fields and DJ Moore. I like Washington in terms of their wide receiver core. I just don't like Sam Howell. It's not a shot really at Sam Howell. It's more just I think that if they were to play Jacoby Brissett, they'd have a better chance of winning. But for the rest of the NFC North, it's sort of scary now to think that the Bears and the Vikings, they're playing eerily similar in terms of, yes, the Bears really got blown out weeks 1 and 2. Kirk Cousins has actually looked, in terms of statistical numbers, really well. He's played really well. And you would sit back, and if you looked at the numbers that Kirk Cousins is putting up, you would think that they've been winning games. The issue is I really do think that the Vikings don't have an identity on offense. I think the reason Kurt's numbers are up so high is because Madison hasn't been as productive as Dalvin Cook was. I think Madison's a good running back. The issue is until that system starts to gel and they understand what they have at the position of running back and they're able to utilize that throughout the game to where it's not all on Kirk Cousins in order to win, it's going to be tough for the Vikings in order to continue to sort it out going through the season. I think they're better than the Bears. I think they can get over the Bears, and I still think the Vikings are better than the Packers. You saw it last Thursday with the Lions and the Pack. The Packers were getting blown out of the game early, and I think that for a lot of people, including myself, when the Lions had the ball and they just weren't trying to score right before half, I think everyone was sitting there thinking, man, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Lions just bite them in the rear end as we're going forward. And sure enough, in the second half, the Packers start to mount a comeback. And everyone was probably sitting there thinking the same thing. We're about to see the exact same Lions that we've always seen for the past 2 decades, that this team's going to get up and they're going to find a way to lose this game. And I have to give it to the Lions. They found a way to win the game. They found a way to come through for their team and get a big victory over the Packers. When you watch that game, you really start, on one side, you have the Lions, which I think need to start, a lot of people are hating on them for how they're using Jahmyr Gibbs versus David Montgomery. This is the only thing I'll say about that, and I'll give a team that I think is doing it right and how it should be utilized with the Lions. When you look at the Falcons, you got Tyler Algier, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Bijan Robinson. They're able to put all those guys on the field at the same time and utilize them. Algier's getting the running back because now you're creating a mismatch with Bijan on the outside in the slot. The Lions can do the same thing, and I think the Lions are even in a better position because Jameson Williams comes back this week. You still have Amon-Ra. You have Sam Laporta, which has been playing out of his mind for tight end. I think that when you go through the entire NFL, he's probably one of the top tier for tight ends right now, especially in terms of production. It's hard to not look at what he's doing in Detroit right now and saying he's having an amazing year, especially for a rookie. Then you have Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. David Montgomery's a good running back. He runs the ball very well, and I think that's why he continues to get touches because of how effective he's running the ball. I think what they need to do with Gibbs is to be able to use 2 running backs in the backfield, to split out Gibbs, see who's covering him. Is it a linebacker? Is it someone that he can take advantage of? Because now that Williams is back, Williams is going to be able to take the top off the top of the defense. He's going to draw a safety cover because they can't just leave him one-on-one with a corner. That being said, now it starts to become more difficult in how do you line up against these guys when David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs are out there combined with all the other talent. Because, hey, I'd love to give safety help to Jameson Williams, but now Amon-Ra's got a one-on-one. Or Sam Laporta's got a mismatch on a linebacker or a safety because now Gibbs is out, so now they're having to put a linebacker out on Gibbs, of which I'll take that matchup every day of the week. Those are the type of things I like to see from the Lions going forward, is now that they're getting all their guys on the field is being able to take advantage of the mismatches that they're going to get. And I think even better than the Falcons, they have Jared Goff. Jared Goff has been playing lights out for a few weeks now, and hats off to him. He throws a pick, opening drive against the Packers, and then plays exceptionally well post that point. For the Packers, you sit back and look at them. Love struggled in that game. Did he come out and have a good second half? Absolutely. But I would also, it's a long time ago to sit back and go, hey, what did Aaron Rodgers first look like when he came out? He had his struggles too. It's part of being a rookie, really a rookie quarterback in this league. You're going to have your struggles. The game is going to constantly be showing you things that you haven't seen before, that they can't replicate in practice. There is only so much that you can do off the field before you have to put it into practice on the field. That's why I say that I think with Minnesota's experience and depth, especially on the offensive front, they should be able to compete with Green Bay and get ahead of them in the division. Do I think that they can compete with the Lions? Yes, because I think their offense is good enough to score in the Lions' defense. The Lions' defense, especially in the secondary, has looked weak at times. Their defensive line, I love the Lions. I still think the Lions win the division, but if anyone out of that division was going to give them a good test, I do think it is still the Vikings. Looking at the other teams in the NFC, this division I think that we all thought was mediocre at best, and I think that they do have one team that's playing exceptionally well, and I actually had them finishing dead last in the division. That's a hit on me, which is the Tampa Bay Bucks. I told at the beginning of the season, I said that this was a make or break year for Baker Mayfield. What you see him doing with the talent that he has around him is exactly what I think Cleveland thought they were going to get. The issue with Cleveland is they didn't really put the caliber guys around him that he has at Tampa Bay. At no point did he have a Mike Williams. At no point did he have a Chris Godwin. Yes, he had a Jarvis Landry, and yes, he had Odell Beckham. I would argue that Odell had zero care on being there. When you look at when he left the Giants to when he showed up to the Browns, it was the same Odell. It wasn't until he went to L.A. did you see Odell take back off under Sean McVay and Matt Stafford, and also the caliber guys that he had around him at the time that were really made it so he didn't have to be the number one wide receiver. You're seeing it right now with the Ravens. Odell's not having the production. You can say, hey, it's part of the injury. I would argue that's the exact same Odell that you saw in Cleveland. But for Baker, he looks really good, and Tampa Bay looks really good. You know they have a defense. I attribute a lot of Baker's success to Bruce Arians. Bruce has not had a quarterback that he hasn't done well with, that he hasn't had numbers put up. I mean, even Winston, when Arians took him over, I think Winston threw for over 5,000 yards. Even though Bruce isn't the head coach, he still has his hands in the Tampa Bay organization. I think he's done a really good job off the field with helping out Mayfield. And there's some great stories coming out about Mayfield, too, that make you like him, not just as a football player, but as a person. Took his entire offensive line to the Bahamas. He's having guys over for dinner. He's doing the things that you don't hear about Russell Wilson. I'll just put it that way. Here's a guy that cares about his teammates, seems like a total bro. The team looks to be playing for him and behind him. I think Tampa Bay's got a great chance to win the division. Ultimately, their only real competition in my eyes is the Saints, and I think the Saints are exactly who we thought they were with Derek Carr, just a 9-7 team. Like, Carr has never been able to produce that type of team that's like 12-4 or 13-3, just a team that's competing at the highest levels. They've always been mediocre, and I think that's exactly what you're seeing from the Saints right now. They come out, they look great to start the season. They go to Green Bay, they're up on Green Bay. Carr leaves, they end up losing. Last week they end up losing. They've struggled to win, or they've struggled to win the games that you want to see the Saints win. Plain and simple. For the Falcons, it really showed over in London that the Falcons have a lot of talent. Their problem is in one facet. It's the quarterback. Desmond Ridder is a liability. I get that Arthur Smith came out and said he's a franchise quarterback. He's not. They have a lot of talent on that team, and it's sort of, the Falcons remind me a lot of the Jets. Is both teams have too much talent to be playing at the level that they're playing at, and the only fault that you can really give of them is the position of quarterback. Until they find a guy that is able to make the plays that you need when you need them, the Falcons are going to continue to struggle. And I think that's why a lot of people before Thursday night's game, one of the big rumors going around is that the Falcons needed to trade for Justin Fields. I still like that for the Bears, mainly because I think Caleb Williams has a higher ceiling than Justin Fields does. Caleb Williams can throw the ball accurately. Fields is so dynamic because he's a runner, and being a running quarterback, at some point that speed falls off. At some point you get hurt. Look at Kyler Murray. Look at Michael Vick. Look at Steve McNair. The difference is between the guys that I just mentioned, especially with McNair and Vick, is both of those guys could throw the football at a level that you need from an NFL quarterback. Once I remember McNair took a shot against Kansas City, I think broke his sternum. And from that point forward, you really didn't see McNair run too much. He would when needed to, but it was one of those shots. It was like it sort of changed his game. But he had always been very dynamic at throwing the football, and that's what he did. And, I mean, took him to a Super Bowl. You can't sit back. And then with the Ravens, he played exceptionally well, too. Took him to multiple playoff games. Same with Michael Vick. Michael Vick was a runner, but that dude had a cannon of an arm. An absolute cannon. I think the play that I always go back to, they're playing the Redskins at the time on Monday Night Football. Opening play, Vick throws like an 80-yard bomb to Deshaun Jackson in stride, middle of the field, 6. That's how they opened up the game. Both of those guys can throw. That's my only thing with Fields is Fields, yes, can he throw a football, but to the level and accuracy that I think Caleb Williams can, no. That's just my opinion. I wouldn't mind seeing Fields go to Atlanta. I think it would immediately upgrade their quarterback room. I don't know how Atlanta is going to do this year. I think they're going to be like the Saints, mediocre, which the issue for the Saints is you're not landing a top-tier quarterback in the middle of the draft unless you're trading up with someone. But we'll find out. Taking a look at the NFC West, this is another division that you really sit back and take a look at and you go, I think they have the best team in pro football right now, which is the 49ers, and I'll address that when we get to the Eagles here in a second and also the Chiefs. The 49ers look exactly like they did last year. Pretty unstoppable. They are good in all assets of their game. The defensive line's great. They have great middle linebackers. They have a great secondary. Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuels, and Brock Purdy's playing out of his mind. And you have Greg Kittle. They have all the pieces there to win, and they are showing it right now. They're blowing teams out. They look really well. They didn't play the best versus the Giants, but they were still in full control of that game. This week is a big week, and I'll get to the Cowboys in a minute versus the 49ers. I think it's the chance for the 49ers to show their dominance. I think Micah Parsons is one of the best defensive ends in the league right now, and it gives them a great test. I still think that 49ers blow them out of the water. I think it's more than a 14-point victory for San Francisco. They're too talented on both sides of the ball to not win this game convincingly. That's just what I see going into the week. When you take a look at the next two teams in the division with the Seahawks and with the Rams, both of these teams I would just say are like mediocre, and it's for varying reasons. When you look at the Rams, you sit back and go, well, this is what happens when you trade away a lot of draft stock. You're just hurting in a few positions that would really make you great, especially on the defensive side of the ball. You look at middle linebacker, you look at secondary, anyone outside of Aaron Donald, they just don't have all the pieces there to be really good. However, Sean McVay knows how to find a wide receiver. The fact that he got Puka Nacua as late as he did in the draft, and Puka Nacua has looked as well as he has, and they're about to get Cooper Kupp back, the offense, as long as Stafford stays healthy, should be really difficult to stop. McVay has a knack for finding guys. It's humorous to say, someone that always catches the football repeatedly, maybe he's not the home run threat every time, but he finds ways to get open. That's what he finds. And what's funny is it really translates to the pros because Cooper Kupp is a home run threat. Puka Nacua, through 4 weeks of football, has been a home run threat, scoring the game-winning touchdown against the Colts last week. McVay finds ways to put these guys in. I think the thing about it is they're still lacking a lot of guys because of how much capital they gave up to get into the draft. Then you go to Seattle, and you say, what's the matter with Seattle? Why does Seattle look this way? My biggest thing with Seattle is that you got Metcalf, but then you go out and you get Smith and Jigba, and you're not utilizing Smith and Jigba. And it's one of those ones that I have to think that the offensive coordinator just hasn't figured out. How do I take these guys that I have out there right now and be able to use them to put them around the field? Because you also have Lockett on the other side. All three of those guys should be putting up ungodly numbers every week, especially with Walker in the backfield. It's just not showing itself on the field. They looked great last week against the Giants on Monday night. Hard to not look good against the Giants. Ask the Cowboys or anyone else that's played them outside of the Cardinals. You're wanting to see that consistency from the Seahawks that you've seen in years past. I think they'll get there. They have too much talent not to, but it's definitely one that I sort of put the blame on the offensive coordinator for not being able to put his players in the best position. Speaking of that, offensive coordinator and struggles, for me, that's the issue with the Eagles right now. Last year when you watched the Eagles were just an unstoppable force. I think everyone realized, hey, this is the team that's going to compete in the NFC. I think they're going to go to the Super Bowl. We'll see what happens. Sure enough, they ended up going. I think that if you took the Eagles team right now and matched them against the 49ers team right now, I think San Francisco wins 75% of the matchups, if not greater. That's just because of the way San Francisco is playing and the way the Eagles look out of sync. Last year, you would say at least 50-50, if not the Eagles taking the advantage. The difference is this year is I think the Eagles have gotten way better on defense, but you can tell offensively they're struggling to find that consistency, and I put a lot of that on the offensive coordinator. They lose their offensive coordinator last year after the Super Bowl, and now you're starting to see a play caller that's not getting the guys in the best position. Now you can sit back and say, well, the guys on the field should just be able to execute whatever play's called. I remember hearing this from my dad a long time ago, and I've had other coaches say it, and I loved it. A coach will make good players look great, but at the same time, they're never responsible for the wins, but they are responsible for the losses. Coaching will take guys just like A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, all these guys on the team, and make them look amazing by putting the right plays in. And they don't win the games, but they can certainly lose the plays. And if you want a play call that lost the game, look no further than Pete Carroll in that Super Bowl throwing the pass. If you had just given it to your best player when you need it to, they beat the Patriots. Marshawn Lynch was getting in the end zone. You'll never convince me otherwise. Bad play calling costs good teams football games. The issue right now, or I guess the saving grace more with the Eagles is that they have the talent right now to overcome bad play calling. The issue is that when you run into a team like the 49ers, who's exceptionally well coached in my opinion, that's where you start losing games. The Eagles need to figure that out before they go forward. Do I think they have any problem in their division? No. I know everyone's high on the Cowboys. The Cowboys came out, beat the Patriots back into submission like it was 1985 with the Bears. And then they've also beaten the Giants amazingly on Sunday night. They've beaten the Aaron Rodgers-less Jets, and they lose to the Cardinals. When you look at the three teams they've beaten in the Giants, the Jets, and the Patriots, none of those three I would consider playoff contenders in the slightest. They're not good football teams. And they lost to a team that many consider to be the worst team in all of football as we enter the year. I think Arizona's playing a lot better. I think that they can probably beat Cincinnati this coming week. But they're not the team that you would sit back and go, hey, Dallas, you lost to this team that you were favored by 13 points. That's acceptable. The Cowboys have not played real talent, and that's why going against San Francisco, I think it's a defining moment for early in the year for the Cowboys. I think San Francisco goes in there and blows them out. We'll see what happens. If the Cowboys were able to come away with the victory, it would convince me a lot about how good the Cowboys fans say they truly are, and it would match what just happened on the field. But we'll find out a lot more about the Cowboys this week, of which I think that you're going to see that they're going to get exposed for not being a great team. They've just played terrible teams along the way. The next two teams, both of which are terrible, are the Commanders and the Giants. This is the thing about the Giants, and I'll put it this way. Patrick Mahomes, the fact that last year you took away Tyreek Hill, I think a lot of people would have said they don't win the Super Bowl. Tyreek Hill helped Mahomes so much that they were going to have a D grade. Then they win the Super Bowl. Why? I think when you have a great quarterback, he elevates the guys around him to play better. And you can see that throughout the league, that when you have a guy that is an exceptional player at quarterback, everyone else on the team gets better when he's there. When you look at Daniel Jones and the Giants team, what player do you say gets better because he's there? It's not Daniel Jones. It's Saquon Barkley. The fact that when Saquon plays makes the Giants better to the point that everyone else on the team gets better because he's on the field, you want that out of your quarterback. I'm not saying that Saquon isn't a good player, that he's not going to elevate whatever team he's on. It's just one of those ones that when Daniel Jones doesn't have Saquon, the Giants are a terrible football team. When he does have Saquon, they're a better team. They're still not a great team. Saquon makes plays to keep Daniel Jones in the game when it should be Daniel Jones elevating that entire team. The same could be said of Washington. You look at the guys that they have on that roster, you would sit back and on paper, the Commanders are an excellent football team. They should have one of the best defensive lines in all of football. They have Scary Terry. They have guys on the offense that should be winning football games, and here they go and they lose to the Bears. Both of those teams are in quarterback situations that they don't want to be in. The issue is that the Giants already paid $160 million to say you are a quarterback of the future. At least the Commanders have not. Until they figure out the quarterback situation for both of those teams, they're going to continue to struggle. Now, when we just mentioned Patrick Mahomes and the AFC with the Chiefs. I get that he didn't have the best game against the Jets. I watched that game, and the only thing it reminded me of is this. 2 years ago, when he played, or 2 or 3 years ago, when he played Tom Brady in the Super Bowl, and they lost, so 3 years ago, what did you see at the beginning of the year in Patrick Mahomes? If you go back and watch the first few games, Mahomes was throwing interception after interception after interception. He was really trying to force throws because of his playmakers. Just get him the ball, they're going to make plays. Reed settled him down, said, hey, I just need you, not to try to control the magic that is Mahomes. He's going to make ridiculous plays. It was more of one of those ones where I need you to be that guy that on 3rd and 10, if you have a wide open guy, to take that pass instead of trying to force it 30 yards down the field and throw a pick. I just need you to help us win games and not lose games. Mahomes will be fine. They showed against the Jets they still have enough talent to win the game, but it was close. They could have easily lost that game to the Jets. The good thing for the Chiefs is they really don't have any competition in the division outside of the Chargers. The issue with the Chargers is as good as the Chargers are, they just find ways to lose games. Luckily, they won this week against the Raiders. But you sit back and you look at that team and you go, you should have blown the Raiders out of the water. They had a rookie quarterback starting, and Khalil Mack had 6 sacks. It's the second most sacks ever recorded in a single game in NFL history. The only person who's done more is one time, which was got 7 sacks in the game, which was Derek Thomas with the Kansas City Chiefs against the Seattle Seahawks. That's the only time that someone's beat him. Multiple guys have gotten 6 sacks. But the fact that Khalil Mack gets 6 sacks and you still almost lost, not lose the game, but it was a few plays away from tying it up. The Raiders were down close to the red zone trying to get 6 to tie the game up. It speaks a lot to the Chargers and the fact that they just don't have all the pieces. And Bosa being hurt and really just sort of being ineffective with the Chargers here as of late, it's a big part of it on their defense. You want to see them play better. They have great talent on the offense. I don't think they're a competition for the Chiefs. And the team that they played against the Raiders, if there was anything that came out of that game, it's how terrible of a coach Mike McDaniels is. Or Josh McDaniels is, excuse me, not Mike. It's starting to become more and more apparent that everyone who left New England and got a head coaching job, one, it's not debatable that all those guys were absolutely terrible in terms of their head coaching roles. But the other thing is that they were only given that chance because of Tom Brady being there. Belichick is an amazing head coach. I have the highest respect for him. I'd argue that the only coach that's better than him is Vince Lombardi, who the Super Bowl trophy is named after. It's hard to top that level of greatness. Both of those guys are head and shoulders above everyone else. When you have a coach that's as good as Belichick and then you pair him with the greatest player to ever play the game in Tom Brady, magic happens. Now you see that when you remove someone from that system, they weren't as good as a coach as people thought they were. They were just a part of two of the greatest individuals in the sport that sport's ever seen. It's easy to take credit for how well the offense is playing when you have Tom Brady throwing the football. I mean, Josh McDaniels threw his rookie quarterback under the bus for the turnovers, and I wanted to sit back and go, yeah, he's a rookie. It wasn't Tom Brady, but that's always been McDaniels' thing. He threw Carr under the bus last year. He's expecting for you to play at Tom Brady's level because guess what? That's what McDaniels got in New England, so he just expects everyone else to play as the greatest player of all time. It just doesn't happen. McDaniels is on his way out. It's just a matter of time before the Raiders fire him. It should have happened last year. He's already walking on his coffin right now. He's 6 feet under. Just no one's told him he's dead yet. The last team that's already been declared dead is the Denver Broncos. Terrible football team. They should have lost to the Bears. They get a win. I don't know where the Broncos go outside of cutting Russell Wilson. When you have Sean Payton and you have the wide receivers that they have, they should be better. And it's clear that right now whatever's going on in Denver is complete and utter chaos. They just cut Randall Gregory. I get that he didn't have the statistics that you would want him to have, but at the same time, I think it's not so much about Randall Gregory. I think it's more about the organization as a whole and how much they're struggling. They're a terrible organization right now. No one would want to play for him. I think all their wide receivers want out. And it's clear that Russell is a huge part of the problem. The issue is the Broncos owe him too much in dead cap space to get rid of him. I think they're stuck with him. They're stuck with Sean Payton. And it's going to be a few years for the Broncos just to get rid of those guys and probably a decade to recover. That's just the hot take, but it's ultimately what it is for me with them. Taking a look at the AFC North, I think the issue or the funny thing is last week I would have told you Cleveland was the best team in the division. Their defense looked great. Watson played better. Watson hurts his back, doesn't play. They play the Ravens, and the Ravens dominated them for 4 quarters of football. I still think in that division, it's between the Browns and the Ravens. If you had to give me a choice right now, who's ahead? It's the Ravens just because of Lamar Jackson. I love Lamar Jackson. I think he's a great player. I wouldn't be surprised to see him take them into the playoffs. For the Browns, they have a defense that's capable of winning. It's just they've never been able to put it together for the entire time as a team since they've been back in Cleveland. The other 2 teams with the Steelers and the Bengals have shown that their offensive line's terrible. The first 10 pass plays that Joe Burrow had against the Titans, the ball was out of his hand in less than 3 seconds. On 7 of those 10 passes, he was being pressured. Think about that. They are literally getting to him in less than 3 seconds. You're just not going to win football games. You're not going to win football games. I can't say that enough. You're going to struggle. A lot of it's been made over his calf injury, but the issue is that the Bengals have always been a team that attacks people downfield. You think about all the games that they won with Burrow and Chase and how they did it. It wasn't dink and dive routes. It was huge shots down the field that took the top off of defense and made it so that under routes became even more prevalent. They don't have enough time to get guys down the field to be able to take those shots, so they're losing games. Then you look at the Steelers and you say, well, what's going on with them? And they are in the exact same situation, in my opinion, as the Falcons are. All of your problems can really be isolated to the fact that Pickett's not playing well. And I think there was questions last year if Pickett was the guy. I think there were questions about Pickett when he came out in the draft. The fact that he failed to the Steelers and they were able to take him, it was one of those ones where it's like he's fallen too far for us to not take him. We know we need a quarterback now that Big Ben's leaving. But he hasn't performed. He's not looked the part. You can tell that especially the game was between the ears. Once you reach the NFL, you can have as much athleticism as you want in college. You can make all these plays, but if you can't read a defense and be able to react appropriately, you're going to lose football games. And that's what you see out of Pickett right now. He's not someone that when he jogs out in the field looks confident as to what's going on. And until he gets confident, the Steelers are going to continue to lose games. The next division, AFC, taking a look at the AFC South, which it's sort of a mess. It's anyone's division. The Jags, you thought they would come in and run the division. They lose to the Texans. The Texans that you thought, hey, it's a huge rebuilding year. You have a brand new rookie quarterback, all these brand new coach, all these moving pieces. They look like the best team in the division right now after week 4. CJ Stroud's on fire. All his receivers are producing. You just sit back and you go, man, this looks like a really good football team. The Colts, if the third guy taken off the board in terms of quarterback with Anthony Richardson, looks to be one of the best quarterbacks in the division outside of CJ Stroud. He's played exceptionally well. You think that, hey, this guy's going to make a difference. You want to see that happen more. The issue for the Colts is that with Richardson's running, he's a big guy. Like, he's going to take some shots. That's already started to happen. I appreciate Lawrence telling what he did after the Jags played him, which he was like, hey, man, I'm not trying to tell you how to play your game. I love how you play. Try to take less shots. It will help you along the way. For the Colts, they come out, they beat the Ravens. They have the ability to be good. It's just a matter, can they beat the teams in their own division? They play the Titans this weekend. I don't like the Titans. Like, I've made that known. Derrick Henry had a good game. Played well against the Bengals because Tannehill was able to throw the ball well. Teams are going to load the box, and if Tannehill is able to throw the ball well, the Titans win. If Tannehill can't play well and can't get anyone to bounce off the line and not stop the run, the Titans are going to lose big time. It's happened in each of their games. The Titans either win by a lot or lose by a lot because that's how their team's built. It all comes down to Tannehill. Which, for Tannehill, he's just never been the guy that has proven that he can take a team all the way. Even the year that he had that was great a few years ago, they get into the playoffs and just stumble against the Bengals as the number 1 seed. You can't have that out of your quarterback. But of those teams, who would I give the nod to right now? Honestly, it's still Jacksonville. I like Doug Peterson too much. I like the talent they have on their team. Jacksonville has a huge game this week against Buffalo in London. I think it's a good chance for the Jags to show who they are if they can compete and beat one of the better teams in the AFC, which rounds out the rest of our football talk with the AFC East. I was talking to my buddy who's a Bills fan, and we both said this. I haven't met a quarterback who more of the team's outcome is put on his shoulders than Josh Allen. How Josh Allen plays determines if the Bills win or lose. And he actually said a guy that I hadn't thought about in a while in Brett Favre. It's very similar. Like, when Favre had really good games, the Packers won. When Favre threw 4 picks, the Packers lost. And it's because the reason I sort of give that same analogy for Josh Allen, their defense isn't good enough to win games. Their running game isn't good enough to win games. It all comes down to Allen. Like, does Allen have a good game? Yeah, the Bills win. Does Allen have a bad game? Yeah, the Bills lose. This season is a perfect example. Josh Allen comes out, throws multiple picks, looks terrible against the Jets. They lose against an Aaron Rodgers-less Jets. Josh Allen comes out, looks amazing versus Miami. What happens? They beat the brakes off Miami. It's just, however Josh Allen plays, that's how they're going to win. Do I think the Bills are a playoff team? 100%. I think that Josh Allen's too good of a quarterback that more times than not, Josh Allen's going to play well. But we'll see as the season goes on if they can continue to build upon their success. The team they played in the Dolphins, it's one of those ones where they score almost the most points in NFL history with 70 points. They were just a few points short of beating that record. If they had kicked the field goal, they would have. It's one of those, I hear my dad say it every single time, anytime a team blows someone out like that, like, hey, they probably should save a few of those points for next week. And sure enough, that happened. For the Dolphins, I think the reason they got beat is they could not stop the run of the Bills. Teams are going to try to run against the Dolphins because the Dolphins' defense honestly hasn't shown they can stop many teams on the run. And until they do, they're going to do that to keep the ball out of the offense's hand. If Tua gets hot, you're going to lose to the Dolphins. The Dolphins have too many weapons to not put up points. If you keep Tua cold and off, he can't get Tyreek Hill going, he can't get Waddle going. They have too much talent on that team. And if they keep going 3 and out like they did against the Bills drive down and get 6, it puts the Dolphins into a bad situation. How teams are going to attack them going forward is exactly like I said. They're going to run the football. They're going to make Miami prove they can stop it. If Miami can't, you better hope Tua's on from the first series or else it's going to be a long day for the Dolphins. I still think the Dolphins are a playoff team. I still think they win the division, in my opinion, just because I think the Dolphins are going to play better throughout the year as it keeps going, as long as they can keep Tua healthy. That's just my opinion as of right now. We'll see how that changes as the weeks go on. The other two teams are not playoff teams, but we'll talk about them in the Patriots and the Jets. A lot of it's been put on Mac Jones, and I'm not saying he's not playing bad. He is. However, I would probably play bad too if last year I had an offensive coordinator who was a defensive coordinator, and then he brought someone back that honestly hasn't done well ever since he left the Patriots, and now he doesn't have Tom Brady and Bill O'Brien. You sit back and you look at the organization, they're just not the Patriots that you remember of Tom Brady. And it's because Tom Brady isn't there. When Tom Brady left the building, they stopped winning. It's hard to, it's like the Buffalo or the Chicago Bulls. Like when MJ left the building, you haven't heard a peep from the Bulls. Why? When the greatest player in history of your sport leaves, you're going to notice a decrease. That's exactly what's happened with the New England Patriots. When Tom Brady left, I don't care who you put in, he wasn't going to be as good as Tom Brady. You can't sit back and expect to have the next greatest player of all time. That's what's happened in the Patriots. What do I think happens as the season goes on? They're going to keep playing Mac Jones for the rest of the year. I think they're going to figure out what they have, and I think at the end of the year, they're either going to cut or ship Mac Jones off. Just my hot take. We'll see what happens. For the Jets, it's clear that if Aaron Rodgers was there, they would at least win more games. The issue is their offensive line is terrible. Like Zach Wilson, hats off to him. He's running for his life. Does he make great decisions? No. Does he throw the ball accurately when he needs to? No. There are times he looks good, but in terms of the player that people thought they were getting out of college, Zach Wilson isn't that. They're going to continue to struggle. For the Jets, it's now that they've had time with Zach Wilson, I don't think they're going to stop playing him. They're not going to go out and get another quarterback. This year is pretty much just a wash. Maybe they finish high enough in the draft, they're able to get some more offensive line help and help Aaron Rodgers out for next year. I know Aaron Rodgers has said there's a chance he could come back and play. The only reason I see that happening is if the Jets can be in the playoffs. If the Jets can't be in the playoffs, Rodgers isn't stepping on the field. They'll just save it till next year. But until which I don't disagree with, the Jets they're not playing good football offensively. I think Rodgers is still running for his life, which he's a lot older than Zach Wilson. So I'd rather Zach Wilson take the shots right now than Aaron Rodgers take them. But that wraps up this week's NFL chat. Feel free to hit us up. Please follow and subscribe on our Instagram and TikTok channels. Hit us up on our website, footballtalksquadron.com. You can find our links to our football podcast there and also our other media channels, and hit us up with any questions you may have. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week. Time to pull jocks.